She was barefoot, heavily pregnant, standing in the scorching Nairobi sun while her own suitcase hit the pavement before she did. Inside the mansion, laughter echoed. Her husband stood on the phone, refusing to meet her eyes. No one moved. No one called her name. Then the sky cracked open. A massive private jet descended from nowhere, its engines shaking the earth itself. The gates froze. 5 men stepped down. Silent, powerful, furious, and everything changed. Where are you watching from right now? If this story pulls you in, don't forget to subscribe. Nairobi was a city that never slept. In its restless hum of traffic and survival, Amara had built her life long before she ever stepped into marble-floored mansions. She was the only daughter in a proud Kikuyu household in Mathar, the only girl among 6 children, raised between the loud, protective love of her 5 brothers, Kofi, Son, Emeka, Chidi, and Tund. Their home was not rich in money, but it overflowed with something far more powerful: discipline, dignity, and an unspoken rule that no one faced the world alone. Their father had been a schoolteacher, a quiet man who believed that dignity was something no one could take from you unless you gave it away yourself. Their mother, a midwife, worked double shifts but never returned home without warmth in her voice. Together, they raised children who knew how to stand tall even when life tried to bend them. And life had tried many times. There were nights without electricity, mornings when breakfast was only tea and bread. But Amara never complained. She had learned early that hardship was not something to fear. It was something to move through. Her brothers adored her. Kofi, the eldest, carried responsibility like it was written into his DNA. He rarely laughed, but when he did, it was deep and real. Son was the opposite, quick to speak, quicker to defend, always the first to stand between Amara and anything that threatened her peace. Emeka was observant, always watching, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Chidi was quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. And Tund, the youngest, had followed Amara everywhere as a child, convinced she could do no wrong. To all 5 of them, she wasn't just a sister. She was something to protect. As Amara grew older, her calm nature set her apart. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She listened more than she spoke. When others reacted, she reflected. There was a steadiness in her that people trusted even when they didn't fully understand it. That steadiness carried her through university in Nairobi, where she studied international business. She worked part-time, saved every shilling she could, and never forgot where she came from. Even when doors began to open for her, she kept one foot grounded in the values she was raised with. It was during her final year that she met Damian Osei. He didn't arrive like a storm. He didn't need to. Damian walked into rooms the way men who are used to power do. Quiet, controlled, aware of the effect they have without needing to prove it. At the time, he was already making a name for himself in real estate and energy, his company expanding faster than most expected. But what caught Amara's attention wasn't his wealth. It was how he listened. Their first conversation had been simple, a charity gala, too many people trying to impress. But when Amara spoke, Damian didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. He just listened. That, to her, felt rare. They began seeing each other slowly. No grand gestures at first. No headlines. No luxury displays. Just long conversations, quiet dinners, and walks where they spoke about family, ambition, and the kind of life they wanted to build. For the first time in years, Damian felt seen. Not as a businessman, not as a rising billionaire, but as a man. And Amara believed she had found someone who respected her. When he proposed, it was private, thoughtful, just the 2 of them beneath a wide African sky as the sun dipped low. She said yes without hesitation. Her brothers were cautious at first. Kofi asked questions. Son watched closely. Emeka did his quiet research. Chidi reserved judgment. And Tund, though grown now, still looked at Damian like he was deciding whether he deserved her. But over time, Damian earned their acceptance. He was respectful. He showed up. He made promises. and for a while, he kept them. The wedding was elegant but not excessive, a blend of tradition and modern life. Amara wore her heritage with pride, refusing to lose herself in a world that often demanded it. For a time, she was happy. The mansion in Nairobi was everything people would expect: wide spaces, polished floors, staff moving quietly in the background. But Amara never let it define her. She greeted workers by name. She treated everyone with the same quiet respect she was raised with. And Damian noticed. In those early months, he came home. He laughed more. He rested more. He seemed lighter. But success does not always come alone. As his company expanded, so did the pressure. Meetings stretched longer. Calls came later. Travel became constant. And slowly, almost invisibly, something began to shift. At first, it was small. A missed dinner. A delayed reply. A tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Amara told herself it was temporary, that this was what building something great required. But time has a way of revealing what patience tries to hide. Weeks turned into months. The house grew quieter. When Damian was there, his mind seemed elsewhere. Conversations became shorter. Silence filled spaces that used to feel warm. And then came the excuses. Just business. You wouldn't understand. It's temporary. But something in Amara's spirit began to tighten. Not fear. Not yet. Just a quiet awareness that something was changing, and she was not part of that change. She heard laughter one afternoon. Real laughter, easy and unguarded, coming from the sitting room. She slowed her steps. And then she saw them. Damian stood near the window, relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in months. Beside him was a woman. Tall, elegant, dressed in a way that suggested both confidence and intention. Vivian Nakato. Amara had heard the name before, a corporate strategist, someone involved in brand restructuring, mentioned once or twice without detail. But what Amara saw in that moment was not business. Vivian stood too close, not in a way that could easily be challenged, but close enough to suggest comfort. And Damian did not step away. Their conversation paused when they noticed Amara. For a brief second, so brief that anyone less attentive might have missed it, Damian's expression shifted. Not guilt. Not exactly. But awareness. Vivian, however, did not hesitate. She turned toward Amara with a smooth, controlled smile. "You must be Amara," she said, her voice warm but measured. "I've heard so much about you." Amara held her gaze. There was nothing openly disrespectful in Vivian's tone, nothing that could be called inappropriate. And yet something beneath it felt carefully constructed. "I hope only good things." Amara replied softly. Vivian's smile widened. "Of course." Damian cleared his throat. "We were just discussing a restructuring project." Amara nodded. She saw. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Days passed. Vivian's name began appearing more frequently, always wrapped in business language, always reasonable, always difficult to challenge without sounding insecure. Soon, her visits to the mansion became more frequent, always with a reason, always during hours that stretched beyond professional necessity. The staff noticed, they always did. But Amara did not need whispers. She had her own eyes, and what she saw was enough to trouble even her steady heart. Vivian moved through the house with growing ease. She greeted staff by name. She gave instructions with a tone that hovered just below authority. She stayed longer each time she visited, and Damian allowed it. That was the part that cut the deepest, not just Vivian's presence, but his permission. The morning Amara found out she was pregnant, the world felt softer. It was not a dramatic moment, just a quiet confirmation inside a clinic room where the doctor's gentle smile carried more weight than words ever could. "You're going to be a mother," the doctor said. For a moment, Amara did not speak. She simply sat there, hands resting on her lap, absorbing the reality of what her life had just become. As she stepped out into the Nairobi sun, she placed a hand lightly against her stomach. It was still early. Nothing visible had changed. But she felt it, a quiet presence, a reason to hope. For the first time in weeks, Her thoughts turned toward Damian, not with doubt, but with a fragile sense of belief. This could bring him back. That evening, she prepared his favorite meal. She wanted the moment to feel grounded in something real, something that belonged to them before everything started slipping away. Damian arrived just after sunset, tired, his tie loosened. When he stepped into the dining room and saw the table set, something in his expression softened. They sat across from each other, sharing a meal that carried memories of better day. Halfway through, Amara placed her fork down. "I went to the clinic today," she said. He looked up, alert. "Are you okay?" There was real concern in his voice. It flickered there, reminding her of the man she had once known. "I'm fine," she said softly. Another breath. "I'm pregnant." The words settled into the space between them. And what came back was not joy. It was, "That's unexpected." He spoke about timing, about pressure, about responsibility, as though the life growing inside her was something to manage, not something to celebrate. She said she understood, not because she agreed, but because she understood something about Damian that perhaps even he did not fully understand himself. He was overwhelmed, not just by work, but by the weight of choices he had been avoiding for too long. Still, understanding did not erase the disappointment. That night, Amara lay awake, her hand resting over her stomach. She had imagined this moment differently. She had imagined joy, connection, relief. Instead, she felt alone. Not physically, but emotionally. And loneliness inside a shared space is a different kind of pain. By the second trimester, Vivian no longer arrived as a visitor. She moved like someone who belonged. Suggestions turned into instructions. Instructions turned into expectations. Expectations became authority. One morning, Amara walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. The head housekeeper, Zora, stood slightly stiff, her posture more formal than usual. "What's wrong?" Amara asked gently. Zora hesitated. Then quietly, "She asked us to change the meal plans. She said the house should follow a new routine." Amara's voice remained calm. "And Damian approved this?" Zora lowered her gaze. "He didn't say no." That was the answer. Not approval, not rejection, just absence. Amara nodded slowly. She did not raise her voice. She did not confront anyone. But as she walked out of that kitchen, one word settled inside her with absolute clarity: replacement. The night it finally broke open, Amara stepped into the study and closed the door behind her. Damian looked up. "She is taking over this house," Amara said. No softness in her voice now. No hesitation. Just truth. He sighed. "We've talked about this." "No," she replied firmly. "You've avoided this." He said it again. "It's temporary. The same shield, the same distance." Amara stepped closer. Temporary does not sound like authority. Temporary does not remove the wife from her own home. His jaw tightened. "You're making this bigger than it is." Her eyes did not leave his. "I am naming it for what it is." A pause. Then, "I am carrying your child," she said, "and I am standing in a house where another woman is being allowed to decide whether I belong here." Damian looked away, and that silence confirmed everything. The morning it happened, the Nairobi sky was painfully clear. No clouds, no warning, just a sharp, unforgiving brightness that made everything feel exposed. Inside the mansion, staff moved with careful precision, avoiding eye contact. Amara stepped downstairs to find her suitcase already packed, already placed near the front door. Vivian stood near the center of the room, composed, in a fitted cream dress. Two security guards waited near the entrance. Zora stood nearby, hands clasped in visible tension. Vivian spoke first, her tone calm and almost gentle. "It's time." Amara looked at the suitcase, then the guards, then Vivian. "My husband is not here," she said. Vivian's expression did not change. "He's aware." That was the moment. Not the guards, not the suitcase. Those two words. He's aware. And something inside Amara, Something she had held together for months finally broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. She did not beg. She did not break down in front of them. She placed her hand over her stomach, not as a shield, but as a reminder, and she walked to her suitcase on her own. "I can walk," she said quietly, and the guard stepped back. Each step toward the front door felt deliberate, real. As she reached the entrance, she paused for just a second. Her eyes moved across the space one last time. The walls, the furniture, the silence. This place had once held her laughter, her hope, her belief. Now it held nothing. She stepped outside. The sunlight hit her immediately. Bright, harsh, unforgiving. Behind her, the door closed. Not slammed, just closed. And that quiet sound carried more weight than anything else that had happened. She made it halfway down the driveway before the dizziness hit. Sharp, sudden. Her vision blurred at the edges. The suitcase slipped from her grip. Her knees weakened. And then she fell, not dramatically, not loudly. She simply collapsed onto the ground, just beyond the gate of a mansion that no longer claimed her. The suitcase tipped over beside her. Dust rose gently around her hands. Inside the house, no one came out. No one rushed forward. No one called her name. Because inside those walls, she no longer existed. She pressed a hand against her stomach. "I'm here," she whispered. Not to anyone else. To the child. A car passed in the distance. Then another slowed and continued. Life moved on. Because the world does not stop for quiet suffering. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time had blurred. Then a voice. "Hey, can you hear me?" A man crouched beside her. Mid-40s. Dark skin. Wearing a worn jacket and a taxi badge clipped to his shirt. His face carried the kind of lines that come from years of watching life unfold from behind a steering wheel. "My name is Joseph," he said quickly. "You fell. Can you sit up?" Amara tried to respond, but her body resisted. "I'm fine," she managed. Joseph glanced toward the gate, then back at her. "Fine people don't collapse like this," he said gently. "Let me help you." He supported her carefully as she shifted upright. He noticed the suitcase. He noticed the gate, the mansion behind it, the guards who hadn't moved. His expression changed, not into judgment, not into curiosity, but into understanding. He had seen this before. He drove her to a small clinic nearby. The doctor checked her vitals, checked the baby, spoke in calm, steady tones. "The baby is stable," she said finally. "But you are exhausted. Your body is under strain. You need rest, proper nutrition, and support." Support. The word lingered. Joseph waited outside the whole time. When Amara emerged, he straightened. "You have somewhere to go?" he asked carefully. She paused. For the first time since everything happened, she faced that reality fully. The mansion was no longer hers. There was no prepared alternative. No plan. Just absence. "I'll find somewhere," she said quietly. Joseph did not push, but he did not leave either. "I know a place," he offered. "Clean. Quiet. No questions." He took her to a guest house run by an older woman named Mama Grace. And for the first time in months, Amara slept without waking every hour. She was no longer enduring. She was recovering. The next morning, Mama Grace brought tea and bread and sat beside her. "You have been carrying too much alone," she said softly, not as a question, but as a quiet truth. Those words stayed with Amara long after the older woman left, because they touched something she had been avoiding. The idea that she did not have to carry everything by herself. That afternoon, she sat by the window. She watched children running in the street below. A woman carrying groceries with quiet determination. Life, messy, unfiltered, unhidden. And in that simple sight, something shifted. She reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the contact list. Kofi, the eldest. The one who would understand without needing explanation. She pressed call. He answered after 2 rings. "Amara." His voice, strong, grounded, immediate. She swallowed. Kofi, she said. Then, I need you. That was all. On the other end, Kofi did not ask for clarification. Where are you? She gave him the address. I'm coming, he said. The call ended. And within minutes, four other phones rang across 4 different cities. Son answered first. What's wrong? It's Amara, Kofi said. That was enough. Emeka, Chitty, and Tund were on the line within seconds. Voices overlapping, questions rising, anger building. Kofi let them speak. Then he said one sentence. She needs us. Silence followed. Not confusion, not hesitation, just alignment. Because in their world, that sentence carried everything. I'm booking a flight. Make it now, said Emeka. I'm already packed, said Tund. Son's voice came last, low, controlled. I'll handle anything else that needs handling. Kofi nodded though they couldn't see him. Nairobi, he said. We meet there. The call ended. 5 separate lives became one purpose. Flight control staff at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport exchanged confused glances as clearance requests came through channels that required immediate priority handling. A private jet, large, sleek, unmistakably expensive, was being cleared for landing with urgency that bypassed normal protocol. But this was not what made people stop. It was the fact that it was not alone. 2 escort aircraft followed behind it, maintaining tight formation, a coordinated presence that suggested not luxury, but authority. Inside the lead jet, Kofi sat in silence. Not nervous, not excited, focused. Across from him, Son tapped his fingers once against his knee, then stopped himself. Emeka reviewed documents on a tablet. Chitty stared out the window, expression unreadable. Tund leaned slightly forward, jaw tight, his energy barely contained. They were not tourists arriving in a foreign land. They were a system moving into position. At the same time, across the city, Vivian stood before a mirror inside Damian's mansion, adjusting her earrings with slow satisfaction. Staff moved around her with careful efficiency, already conditioned to her presence. She had arranged a small corporate gathering for that evening. Everything was set. She was in control, or so she believed. What she did not know was that equations can be rewritten. When the jets landed, the air changed instantly. Kofi stepped out first, then Son, then Emeka, Chitty, and Tund. 5 men, dressed simply, carrying a presence that required no decoration. At the mansion, the security guard at the gate shifted uneasily as their convoy arrived. Then, without a word being spoken, he stepped aside. The gates opened, almost respectfully, and they walked in. Inside the mansion, guests from Vivian's gathering began to quiet. Heads turned. Conversations faded. Damian, who had just returned, stepped into the living room and immediately sensed the shift. Who are you? He asked. Kofi did not answer immediately. He looked past him, scanning, assessing. Then his eyes landed on Vivian, and something in his expression hardened. Where is my sister? He asked. Calmly. The question cut through everything. Vivian blinked. Sister? Son took one step forward. Amara Osei, he said. Where is she? A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Damian's expression changed. Amara is... Kofi interrupted him. Don't speak about her yet. The room went completely still. Because that sentence was not anger. It was control. Emeka stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost surgical. Your wife left this house. Pregnant. Alone. No explanation justifies what happened. Damian's face tightened. I didn't, Son snapped. Didn't what? His voice rose for the first time. Kofi raised a hand sharply. Son stopped, jaw clenched. Chitty spoke quietly. We are not here for assumptions. We are here for truth. Vivian finally stepped forward, her composure returning in fragments. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said carefully. Amara chose to leave. No one forced her. For the first time, Kofi looked at her directly, and that alone made her hesitate. Say that again, he said. She held her ground. She left on her own accord. A pause. Then Tun spoke, his voice low, deliberate. Interesting. Because we found her outside your gate. Collapsed. That word hit the room harder than any shouting could have. Damian turned slightly. What? Vivian's expression flickered for just a moment. Pregnancy stress, she began. Enough, Kofi said. The single word silenced her completely, not because it was loud, but because it ended all space for excuses. He stepped forward, each movement controlled, measured, dangerous in its restraint. You will not reinterpret her suffering, he said. Not in front of us. Damian finally tried to assert himself. This is my house. Emeka tilted his head. Is it? The question exposed everything. Even Damian hesitated. Sohn let out a short, humorless laugh. You allowed your pregnant wife to be removed from your home, and you're calling this yours? Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then Kofi turned to Damian, his voice lowered. We are not here to argue ownership. We are here to understand how a man lets his wife become invisible inside his own decisions. When they arrived at the clinic, Kofi stepped in first. He stopped the moment he saw her. For a brief moment, everything else disappeared. The mansion, the anger, the flight across cities. All of it collapsed into one sight. Amara. He walked forward slowly. She turned her head, and when she saw him, something inside her finally broke, not from pain, but from relief. Kofi, she whispered. That was all it took. He reached her bedside and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You're safe now, he said quietly. Behind him, the others entered one by one. Sohn's face fell the moment he saw her condition. The anger he had been carrying didn't explode outward. It sank deeper, heavier. Tun entered last, and had to turn away for a second. Seeing her like this was worse than anything he had imagined. Damian entered after them and froze. He had expected arguments, accusations, anger. Not this. Not Amara lying in a hospital bed looking smaller than he remembered. Not because she had changed, but because she had been carrying too much for too long. His mouth opened slightly. No words came. Amara looked at him. Not with hatred, not with pleading, just clarity. And that clarity hurt more than anger ever could. Kofi broke the silence first. She collapsed outside your gate, he said. Just fact. Damian swallowed. I didn't know she was that unwell. Emeka spoke quietly. You didn't know? Or you didn't look? Damian said nothing, because both answers were dangerous. Then Amara spoke. Her voice soft, but steady. She told them everything. The distance. The silence. Vivian. The gradual loss of space inside her own home. She did not exaggerate. She did not dramatize. She simply told the truth as she had lived it. When she finished, no one spoke. The room felt suspended. Then Kofi turned slowly toward Damian. You heard her, he said. Damian nodded. Yes. Sohn stepped forward. And what do you have to say? Damian hesitated. Then, I failed her. The words were simple, but honest. Emeka studied him. Failure is not a moment, he said. It is a pattern. Chitty added quietly. And you allowed someone else to replace her space while she was still inside it. Tund finally spoke, voice low. She was carrying your child while being pushed out of her own life. Damian looked down. He had no defense. Kofi stood. This is no longer about emotion, he said. It is about consequences. And it is about protection, for her and for the child. Damian didn't argue. Part of him understood. Even if it was humiliating, it was necessary. Amara listened quietly to all of it. Then she spoke, not loudly, but clearly. I don't want revenge, she said. All eyes turned to her. I just want peace. Her words softened the room in a way nothing else had. Even Sohn paused. Kofi nodded slowly. Then that is what we will ensure. But Amara added something else. I don't want to go back there. No mansion. No environment that had broken her. No place where her presence had to be defended. Damian looked up immediately. Amara, she shook her head gently. No, she said. I can't heal there. Silence followed. And even Damian understood. Because healing does not happen where the wound was created. Then you won't go back, Kofi said. Simple. Final. Damian visited her one last time, days later. He came alone. He didn't ask her to return. He came to accept what he had broken. I failed you, he said. And she replied, I forgave you, but I did not return. That distinction settled between them like truth finally spoken without confusion. Amara moved to a quieter place arranged by her brothers, somewhere away from the mansion, away from memory, away from pressure. Not luxury, not isolation, just stability. Mama Grace visited often. Joseph checked in regularly, sometimes bringing small things for the baby. Life slowly rebuilt itself, not as it was before, but as something new. Months later, when her son was born, the room was full but not crowded. Her brothers were there. Mama Grace was there. Even Joseph stood quietly near the door, smiling softly. The baby's first cry filled the room, strong and clear. And in that moment, something in Amara finally settled completely. Not because everything had been fixed, but because she had not been destroyed. Kofi held the child first. He looked strong, he said. Amara smiled. He had no choice. Son laughed softly. That sounds like our family. Outside, Nairobi continued as always, unchanged, unmoved, unaware of the small miracle inside a quiet room. Sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by what people do loudly, but by what they refuse to do quietly. Amara's story is a reminder that silence in the face of disrespect is not peace. It slowly becomes permission. She entered her marriage with love, hope, and patience, believing that understanding could heal distance, and that time could fix what was breaking. But she learned something painful. Love cannot survive where responsibility is constantly avoided. When a person stops protecting what they promised to protect, the relationship does not end in one moment. It dissolves slowly through unanswered calls, unspoken truths, and the quiet acceptance of the unacceptable. Yet her journey is not only about pain. It is about awakening. True strength is not staying where you are endlessly broken. It is recognizing when endurance has turned into self-abandonment and choosing yourself before everything inside you is erased. She did not win by fighting louder. She won by finally stepping out of a space that no longer honored her dignity. If this story touched you, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what part of Amara's journey stayed with you the most? Subscribe for more stories about love, strength, betrayal, and the kind of healing that quietly changes everything.